Okay. So if some night you can't sleep, pull out these, look at pages 28 and 29 on a full accrual basis, and that will solve the issue. The fund statements, and again, which is what we go through on the slide, the funds of the town are really much more on a short-term cash flow basis. They don't report long-term capital assets, they don't report long-term debt. It's really what was budgeted to be raised in the current year against what was encumbered and incurred during the current year. Revenues are recognized largely, again, on a cash basis, or if they're collected within 60 days of year end, they're counted as revenue within that period. Typically, expenditures are recognized when the liability is incurred. So when we make a purchase, when we receive value from services, those types of issues. So, the net position or net fund balance of those governmental funds are really what's available to be appropriated in future periods, and what the town uses for cash flow for between tax collection dates and revenue and expenditure timing issues. So now we get to the good news. The town's fund balance for the year ended June of 24 increased by a little over $5 million generated from current year operations. The unassigned fund balance of the town, that is the difference between cash and liabilities, net of anything that's been earmarked for other spending. So this is the true unassigned fund balance that can be appropriated for future purposes, just under $16 million. It represents about 14% of the general fund's prior year budgeted expenditures. It's up a couple $1 million from the previous year, and it's really approaching the Government Finance Officers Association and the bond rating agencies typically are recommending somewhere between 8 and 16% of your budget, 1 to 2 months of expenditures, to be in that unassigned fund balance to smooth cash flow purposes. So at 14%, the town's getting to the healthier end of that spectrum. Certainly not excessive at this point, but a nice healthy jump this year to bolster that town's general fund balance. And the general fund that's presented within the statement includes both the town side general fund as well as the school general fund combined into one unit.
James, before we move on,
Sure.
I think can we just take a minute to celebrate
Yes.
fund balance?
Yes.
That jump, because again, we are aspiring to get to 16.6, which I know is best practice, and so it's good to see that. And Norm, I know you did this during the finance committee meeting, but I think it would be helpful for the council to understand. I tried to represent it last time. What were the things that led to the increase that we saw? Typically, we were more around 10% of unassigned fund balance, and now we're at, it says 14%, but I'm around 14.5%, because it was really close to that. So,
Yeah. Counselor, I've got a slide after him.
Okay.
Can we
yes.
can we save those for that?
Let's celebrate.
Yeah.
Is there a song?
And again, within the combined results, the school's general fund, the fund balance of the school portion increased by a little better than $57,000. None of that fund balance is assigned because it's all committed for educational purposes. So it does not impact what the combined is showing is appropriable. The next slide just gives a brief overview of the fund balance section of the town's governmental funds. Again, there are two major funds that by definition are presented separately. General fund being the largest fund of the town. Again, it shows we have some non-spendable fund balance that's represented by inventories, cannot be used to liquidate appropriations. There's some restricted fund balance, a little better than $3.7 million, that is fund balance revenue that's been recognized that has strings attached to it. Management has committed and assigned an additional $4.6 million for specific purposes, and then an unassigned fund balance of $15,902,000, showing the change from the previous year. The Parkway Assessment Fund, while that fund balance is still in a negative position, it did increase by a little better than $1.16 million during the year. So that fund had significant improvement in its health. The other column is a conglomeration of all the other funds that the town maintains that don't meet the measurement definition to be presented as major. Those also increased overall during the year by just under $3.2 million in net position for the year. So, favorable results all around. There's a chart that does show the trend in fund balance over the past 7 years. You can see where it was referenced over that fund balance had been around $10 million. This year crossed over that $15 million threshold, while total also went up. certainly the right way you want to see trends moving. The next slide does a brief synopsis of revenues and expenditures during the year. Again, much more akin to a cash basis presentation. What was actually collected, taxes were just over $88 million. Our intergovernmental revenue is about 19, and another local source is just over 9 million, for a total of about 116 million. The town's current expenditures include general government, public safety, public works, education, recreation, current programs that have been being run. The expenditures there are about just under $108 million. Debt service was consistent with the budget, and capital outlay was another $1 million that was expended from the general fund. There's also other capital funds that also expended significant amounts during the year in that far right column. But again, you can see what makes up the increases in fund balance from these three columns that are presented within the financial statement. When we look at results of operations comparing to budget for the year, total revenues came in above what was budgeted by just a little better than 2.1 million. Again, taxes, that's all types of taxes combined, came in about 550,000 above what was anticipated. Certainly on the level of taxes that are being raised, $550, relatively insignificant, but again on the positive side of what was expected in the budget. Licenses and permits slightly below. Intergovernmental revenue was above. One of the biggest ones, the variance we see is investment income. Again, was above budget by about $900,000. Certainly this is the first year in a while where a lot of our government clients had significant investment returns. Rates rebounded in the right direction.
So just a clarifying question, these are the types of things that contributed to the bigger unassigned fund balance?
Yeah,
He's stealing my thunder.
Norm has a different slide. We can gloss over this one a little bit. Moving on expenditures. Expenditures were below budget by just under $4.5 million. Education, about $2 million. Capital improvements, $1.5 million. Public works is about $513,000. Again, as part of the audit, as part of our risk assessment, we rotate different transaction cycles, and we always look at the budget expectations, how the budget was developed, if there were any weaknesses in that. One of the tools we use from a risk perspective is what went over budget, but to make those calls, we need to know what went into formulating the budget. We did not come to any conclusions that there were weaknesses in the budgetary process. The variances were really based on changes in condition, one-time items, isolated changes. So, nothing significant there.
Can I ask a question on slide 11?
Sure.
So, not for maybe today, but Norm, as we start the 2026 budget process, it would be good to understand, even if these were one-time things, what those one-time things were, and just make sure how that impacts the 2026 budget, if it does or doesn't.
Okay.
Yes, and I know the process. The process for looking at the 26 budget is year-to-date expenditures in 25. Also looking at 24's actual is probably valuable. When we move on to pension plans, pension liabilities are not reported within the fund financial statements, again, because they're long-term obligations. Overall, the plans report a net pension liability of just under $6 million. This is based, the measurement of pension obligations are generally 1 year behind what the financial reporting year is. So this is reflective of investment returns that would have happened in 23 primarily. What we're seeing in initial valuations that we're seeing projected for 25s is that investment income, similar to what the general fund experienced. The pensions are also recognizing that within the 24 year, it's just delayed 1 year for pension reporting purposes. So, compared to most of our other communities, the town's overall pension liabilities are well below what most of our other clients have. Most of them are facing significant, much more significant liabilities. This isn't a liability that you can really write a check for. It's going to be, it fluctuates year by year based on the pension valuation. The town has made all annual required contributions historically, but again, the impact of investment returns on the valuation result can cause some fluctuations from year to year. So, the recommendation there is really just continue paying the required contributions as the actuaries determine them, and ride it out. The town does maintain 2 post-employment benefit plans. The total liability for those, again, a year referenced out, is just over $11 million. There's no funding of this as a pension plan would have. This is really funded on a pay-as-you-go basis as you pay retiree health care premiums each year. The computation of this is one of the most significant items that requires a lot of estimates. It requires an estimate of healthcare trend rates. It requires some assumptions as far as what the census is going to be, what the makeup of those claims are going to be into the future as over the employee's projected service life. Again, not anything you can write a check for. Some of our clients have started pre-funding this as if it's a pension. Most of our other clients have much larger liabilities than the town of Scarborough have. So, I'll leave that one where it is.
That's enough said about that.
Yeah. Again, with the other components of our audit, we do a federal compliance audit of federal programs. For compliance, we look at internal controls over compliance as well as actual expenditures, whether they complied with the terms of the grants. The programs that were determined as major this year, there were no findings on either the internal control or non-compliance side. As part of the audit, we do issue a communication to those charged with governance, the town council. Police report that's not remarkable. There are no issues to be reported, no delays caused by management. Of course, getting this done by Thanksgiving kind of shows that in proof. No disagreements, no items of opinion shopping or being asked to look at transactions a certain way. We received full cooperation and access to all the records we requested. And in closing, I just want to thank management for, again, cooperating, helping us get through everything. Our team loved coming up to Scarborough this year. They rented an Airbnb and they had a good time for the week as well. So if there are any questions, we're happy to answer them. But again, appreciate our relationship with the town and management, and look forward to coming back again real soon.
Thank you so much. Any questions before Norm presents his slides? Okay, great.
All right, thanks. So this first slide is just to give you a little history on when the past audits have been issued and available. And the audit opinion date is basically the date the audit's done and Jim's firm or whoever did it in the past signed off. The yellow highlights represent years where the audit was completed within 6 months of the end of the fiscal year, which is the deadline with GFOA. It's our fiscal policy says have it done within 6 months, and it also meets the test of really what a timely financial report represents. So so you see the string there from 2012 through 2022, where except for 1 year, it wasn't within the 6 months, and 22 is my first year, so I was already 182 days behind when I landed. So
When you made your first.
we'll forgive that year and
Forgive that year, Norm.
yeah. So this year is the soonest that the audit's been available since 2006. So what I want to take this time is, again, kudos to my staff. I have a fantastic accounting group. I have fantastic colleagues in the school department, and the town staff outside of the finance and the school are very cooperative when we request information for the audit. So I think we all should celebrate the fact that we work well together, and the issue date is a product of the collaboration and the quality of the team. So that's what I wanted to do with this schedule, was really sing their praises. And we've got a really good partner in our audit firm that when I said, hey, I'd like to issue the ACFR before Thanksgiving, they didn't throw me off the roof.
You get much earlier than that, we might, but we'll.
And staff didn't either, so everybody bought into it, and we did it. So that's why I want to sing their praises. If we can go to the fund balance schedule now. Jim kind of spoke to this in his presentation, but if we look at the bottom of the schedule that's highlighted there in yellow, we see that our unassigned fund balance is 14.46, which rounds to 14.5. So that is well within our old policy that the minimum of 8.33 with a target of 10. You all upped the minimum this year before we finished the audit, and the green column represents the fund balance ratio as applied to the new policy with a minimum of 10. So we're well above minimum. Our aspirational target is 16.67, which is 2 months worth of expenditures to have in your fund balance. So we're well on our way. We've talked many times in different forums that the collection of the advance to the Higas Parkway was going to improve our fund balance, and you see right here one of the components that drives that increase to 14 and a half is about 1.1 million that we collected from the Higas Parkway this year. Other factors that contributed to that increase, we did our GO bond issue in fiscal 24, and the piece that landed in the general fund was about $3 million of proceeds from that. So using that cash basis that Jim mentioned, that increased our fund balance because we paid ourselves back for previous capital expenditures. Another contributing factor were two areas where we outperformed budget. The first was, again, stealing my thunder. On the investment earnings, we outperformed by about 900,000, and that was a twofold. One was I had budgeted based on the chatter that the Fed was going to cut rates 3 times in fiscal 24, and they only cut once, so rates were higher than anticipated. So not necessarily a one-time event, but it's one of those things that is you do the best you can at predicting, and I'll factor in Fed comments when I budget again in 26 for investment earnings. The other was because of the bond issue, we had some excess funds, and because I have a fantastic staff and we were caught up on audits, we were able to manage our investments better than we had in the past several years. So we did a better job of managing our available funds, and our investable balances were higher than they had been in previous. Most of the time they've been sitting in checking accounts rather than excess funds being invested. So those two factors drove $900,000 of excess earnings that we over what we budgeted. The other factor was our excise tax revenue outperformed budget by 850,000-ish rounded, and we did very well on registrations of things that require excise tax. So I think that's an item that the trend will continue to be. So we will most likely, compared to previous budgets, we'll probably budget a higher number for that. And that's not one, I consider that an ongoing. And then the thing that would cause us to pull back on that is how healthy the economy is and how much spendable income people have. So those are the factors that get us to where we are, on fund balance of about 14.5%. All of our other budget variances and everything else really netted to, less than $1 million. So, we can point to those handful of items that, got us to where we're at. And looking ahead to, fiscal 25, we'll bring in another 1.2 million to collect on the Higas advance. So that will, everything else being equal, that will even get us closer to the 16.67 by the end of fiscal 25.
And I would just add, this year in the budget, we carried a significantly higher overlay because of the revow, which thanks to Nick and all of the assessors team's work, we haven't seen much use of that. So again, that's another big chunk of money that might, depending on what happens the rest of the year, we can't predict what's going to happen, but assuming things stay on this path, that will be another big contribution to next year as well.
All right. Liam, if you could flip over to the ACFR, I would like to spend a few minutes, give you a brief tour of one of my favorite documents.
Away we go.
Let's go back to that first page, if you don't mind.
Light reading.
The reason I want to highlight the first page is throughout this document, there are divider pages that contain artwork. GFOA wants you to highlight your town or city. So the way you do it from the accounting front is you put pictures on your divider pages. And that's good. We need to promote our, but what I wanted to point out about the artwork in our CAFR is that these come from the photos that are submitted in the town-wide photo contest. So we have some fantastic photographers out in the community. So, and except for the cover page, all the photographers they're credited on the divider page. So if you look at it, okay, let's go to the next one. Once again, I'm tooting the horn of my staff. This is fiscal 23. You all have heard this before, but this particular FY 24, we've already submitted it to GFOA for review, and we fully expect to get the certificate for this year's ACFR, which once we receive that would bring us to 20 consecutive years of receiving this award. Let's go to the next one. In the management discussion and analysis, we put some pictures, some graphs into, I'll try to tell the story. Everybody gets tired of reading words. This is our expenses by function, and not surprisingly, our education group takes up 57% of our expenses, and the other large groups are public safety and public works. So nothing surprising in how this is plays out. Let's go to the next one. Can you make that bigger? At the top of the page, what I wanted to highlight here is we talk about our ratings, our bond ratings. We're AA3 with Moody's. And what I wanted to highlight was the comment that we put in here that came from their ratings report, that we have adequate financial reserves. But this was before the increase in fund balance. So we've got more than adequate reserves now. Manageable debt burden and low pension liability. So again, you're stealing my thunder over here, but that's okay. Standard & Poor's, the next paragraph down, we're currently at AA+. We're like one notch below the highest level with them. And the comments that they make similar comments, that we have consistent budgetary performance, strong management with good financial management, and moderate debt profile, and S&P also looks at our environmental factors. So environmental, social, and government risks are in line with the sector. So they're looking at how vulnerable are we to climate, things of that nature, and social factors when they're looking at those environmental considerations. Let's go to the next one. So if we can just kind of scroll it up a little bit, there we go. This is we're in the footnotes section now. This footnote lists our general obligation debt by issue. And just wanted to show that we're at the end of fiscal 24, we were at a little over 81 million. And we've already made our fiscal 25 debt payment. And I'll show you that here in a minute. But so our oldest debt issue was our 2014 GO. We can go to the next one. This discloses how much we're going to pay each year in principal and interest on that debt that was existing then. And it does annually for the first 5, and then we group it in 5-year increments the farther out we get. So we've made that $10 million payment already, 1st of November, and 7 million of it went to principal. So we reduced our debt 7 million. If we go to the next one. We've talked a lot about fund balance. This schedule in the footnotes breaks it out by category and tells us exactly how much is non-spendable, restricted, committed, assigned, and then our unassigned there at the bottom. And we see our, in the restricted area, we see our Higas Parkway advances at 1.5 million at the end of fiscal 24. So there will still be a little bit left after we collect this year on that advance. So it will be almost satisfied by the end of this fiscal year. So the next one. One of the things we're required to do is any events subsequent to fiscal year end that are material, we have to disclose. So note 27 is where we talk about our bond referendums that were on the November election. So this area discusses if those were passed and what those proceeds, once we bond, will be used for. If we can go to the next one. Again, here's a schedule of our debt, but this one gives you all sorts of detail. This tells you every payment on every bond issue in the future. So if you want to know how much we're going to pay on a specific bond issue, this is your page. Let's go, and it's a 2-pager, so it continues on the next one. Yeah, if we can go to the next one after that. Jim's already talked about this, but if you want to look at any line item, budget to actual for the general fund, this is your schedule right here, the page 124, if you want to write it down. This is the one, when you have insomnia, this will cure it right here. But those factors that I talked to that contributed to the increase in fund balance, you'll see that detail. This is a 3-page schedule, and it gets us to a net surplus for the year. So we did very well in managing our budget to actual. If we can go to the next one. So now we're in the back of it. So if you've read the ACFR from front to back, you're getting tired. So this is where you might say, oh, I'll save that for later, and you never get back to it. But there's a lot of good information back in the stat schedule. This is our top 10 property taxpayers, and it compares the current year, 24, to 10 years ago, 2015. And if you look closely at that schedule, you'll see that 6 out of the 10 are the same as they were 10 years ago. So we've got, in our largest group, we've got quite a bit of stability in our property taxpayers. So let's go on to the next one. This schedule calculates our legal debt margin according to state statute. And you're allowed 15% of your total assessed value that you report to the state. And for us, that's $983 million. I cannot foresee a time that we would even get close to having that much debt, but according to state statute, we're legal if we get there. The second half of that schedule is the legal margin that we have imposed upon ourselves. And that's about 556, so almost half. So we've really, for fiscal policy purposes, we've limited ourselves. And even at this level, I still wouldn't foresee us getting anywhere near that. We're at for the state's limit, we're at about 0.6% of our legal margin. So we're very, very low. So this is a required disclosure. So that's in here for anyone to look at. We can go to the next one. This is kind of a schedule of interest to a lot of folks, is how much of our debt service, what percentage of expenditures does our debt service represent? The GFOA, as a best practice, they say it should be no more than 15%. So in this 10-year schedule, we see that we've never exceeded what GFOA recommends as your upper limit. And in fact, we're declining the last 5 or 6 years, and we're under 9% in fiscal 24. So we have a very manageable debt service level right now. If we go to the next one. Demographics for Scarborough, our population estimate is a little bit less than 24,000. Our per capita income is a little over 63,000. Median age is 47, so I hate to say I'm above median here. So Don and I are above median, right? School enrollment has held fairly steady over the last 10 years, just, slight wobbling back and forth. And our unemployment is very good. Next one. This table shows our top 10 employers. And it does the same thing as the taxpayer table. It looks at this year and it compares it to 10 years ago. And if you look at the list, 8 out of the top 10 employers are the same as they were 10 years ago. So very, very consistent.
Well, if that's okay, I have a question. So this also looks like when you were showing the chart of the top 10 taxpayers for the town, is that correct, right?
There's going to be some,
You'll notice that they're not a taxpayer, but they are one of the biggest employers.
yeah. Yeah.
Excuse me, Norm.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is, Piper Shores, I believe, pays something in lieu of taxes. Is that correct? Do we get fees from them
Yeah,
in lieu of taxes?
right.
Does Maine Medical Center do anything similar?
Piper Shores pays full taxes.
Well, they pay full tax.
Full tax. They are the number one taxpayer. They were 10 years ago, and they certainly are now.
Sorry.
But Maine Health, but
Right. I've had conversations with Maine Health, and we were not quick to volunteer that, but we have asked that question directly.
Challenge you about
That's a possibility, I suppose.
I just an observation, like looking at the town, I'm surprised to see that how little it's grown in terms of employment from 2015 to 2024, based on everything that has been happening with the schools and all the services we provide. So again, just that's interesting.
That's less than 100 employees over 10 years.
All right, let's go to the next one. This is unemployment only data, and I just wanted to show this to highlight that the Portland statistical area and the state as a whole and our town is very, very solidly less than the national unemployment rate. So that speaks to our economy and that's all I want to say about that. So, let's go to the next one. If you're interested in what various departments do, we report certain metrics in the ACFR. And we report a full 10-year history of things. So if you were interested in, say, the finance department, they're like the second, third group there. How many excise registrations do we process annually? It's over 30,000 excise transactions. We do over 10,000 tax bills annually, and we do an ATV registration here and there and a fishing license once in a while. So my staff in the revenue office, they do north of 40,000 transactions a year. And if you walk by and see the lobby full, there's your number. And they do an excellent job. So and all the other departments, they have their stats as well. If we scroll down just a bit there, rescue, there's your number of ambulance runs annually. So we do about 3,300. It seems like we do about 10,000, Tom, with all the sirens that we hear every day. So, that's the tour. Again, all of this doesn't happen without fantastic staff. So one last round of kudos for everybody. November 15th next year.
You're gonna get a physical round of applause. Thank you so much, Norm, for your thoroughness and your willingness to walk us through what you consider the highlights. Somewhere I hope former counselor Hamel is smiling at the reporting and your meeting the deadline. I hope.
Thank you.
Also kudos to the staff and thank you so much for your collaboration and bringing this to us tonight. Are there any final questions?
We didn't give Kate an opportunity to make. any
Yes,
comment.
anything from the school department? Kate?
No, we're
always
just
love to hear.
super gratified to have this partnership. I would say Norm's staff, he says how great they are. You can't believe how amazing, particularly the two folks who work most directly with Norm, Jen and Donna. They probably could do the audit by themselves, don't you think?
Yeah.
Jim? And probably do a better job than we would. But it's just been really delightful working with them.
You know, I'll add our involvement. It's nice to work with clients where everybody cares about what they're doing and because our other way to make it happen. We don't always get that.
That's why we're able to find an auditor and some towns are not able to find
Mm,
auditors, right?
Yeah.
Well,
I like that humble brag.
Yeah.
Counselor Cushing.
couple of comments. First, I really appreciate the effort.
Hey, comes back.
John will adjust it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the effort of going through that 100 and some odd page report to point out the highlights, because I think that those highlights are important. I read a bunch of it, but I promise you I did not get past page 60. And so bringing those things forward, I think is important to adding real life and color to this concept that this town is very well managed fiscally. And I think the last slide that you put up, where we show metrics, to say that in addition to spending your money, we're actually doing stuff for you. And that stuff is measurable. And I think as we go forward in our new budget process, we should begin with that story. What are you getting for your money? How many transactions? How many college graduates do we have? How many people started businesses and so forth? What is the output of all of this? Because at the end of the day, that's where are we in relationship to our vision? So I commend you for taking the time to go through that with us. And I hope that we pick up on it and really make a larger effort to get that message out to the people who are writing the checks twice a year.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, thank you very much. With that, I will go ahead and adjourn the workshop. We will be back for our regular business meeting at 7 o'clock. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. This is the Scarborough Town Council business meeting for Wednesday, January 8th, 2025. Kristen, can you, oh, I always do that. Let's say the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Kristen, now can you call the roll, please?
Counselor Doherty. Counselor Cushing.
Here.
Counselor Shoup.
Here.
Counselor Fellows.
Here.
Counselor Donovan. Counselor Anderson.
Here.
Chair Seither.
Here. Item number 4 is general public comment. At this time, we will take general public comment from anyone wishing to speak on something that is not on our agenda this evening. So if you have a non-agenda item that you would like to speak to, you can take the podium at this time. Seeing none and no one online, I will close general public comment. Item 5 are the minutes from December 18th, 2024. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Any discussion? No, all those in favor? I see that as unanimous. Thank you. Item 6 is adjustments to the agenda. We had considered potentially moving the public hearings up in the agenda if we felt like it was going to be for time reasons. But I don't anticipate that the earlier items on the agenda are going to take us all that long. And so my recommendation is to just leave the agenda as is. Okay. Item 7 is treasurer's warrants, which I took care of prior to the meeting. Item 8 is the town manager's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll do my best. I'm struggling with a cough here, but I'll persevere, I hope. Close the gap, not much to report. I was in communication today with our consultant. We're still waiting the DEP permit. All bid plans and documents are ready to go. We're very close in working with our partners at the Eastern Trail Management District. They, for obvious reasons, are anxious about this project, more so than us, I think, in many respects. So I know I'm a broken record, but I committed to including this consistently every time the council convenes, if only to keep me honest and keep the public aware of where we are. So I assure you, we're doing everything we can and patiently awaiting our state regulators at this point. With respect to beach fees, I think the council is aware, this matter has kind of worked its way through various different town committees. I think in its wisdom, the council leadership said, really based on past experience with such matters, anything beach related typically is of interest to the public for good reason. And the suggestion was we get some publicity around this issue. And to that end, I know it was featured in the January 1st newsletter. From that, the leader picked it up and a number of other media outlets. And so I think we've actually got some pretty good coverage on this issue. At this point, we're planning on bringing the matter before you at one of your February meetings, really to make sure we have time to get these new fees in place for the upcoming season. And yes, I am looking forward to the summer season. Council goals, this is just kind of housekeeping reminder. The council will convene on Saturday, January 25th. We do have GPCOG, a representative from GPCOG assisting to facilitate that process. 2 days prior, the Thursday, the January 23rd, council's agreed to meet with senior staff. We're really looking forward to this opportunity to spend a couple of hours. Staff is preparing some work in advance and we'll be sharing that with the council in advance. We really want to make that time conversational, informal as best we can, and productive for all involved. So very much appreciate your willingness to spend some time with us. The Community Services Director position, I think I've kept the council and the public abreast of this process. We really embarked immediately on recruitment for Todd Souza's replacement. And I'm pleased to say that we've worked through a process starting with 15 candidates, interviewed 5. We shortlisted in second interviews for 2 candidates. I can say without question, this was the most kind of inclusive and exhaustive recruitment process that I've conducted since I've been here. Very pleased with that in terms of making certain that we had a lot of key people, including staff at Community Services involved in the process. And all of that is really good input. You know, of course, I have my own opinions, but in this case, I really listened carefully to what the community and what the staff was saying. So I'm pleased to announce that I've extended an offer and he's accepted. This is for Nick Cleish. Nick is currently the Recreation Director for Portland Parks and Recreation Facilities. He's been with the City of Portland his whole professional career, I believe over about 18 years. In progressively responsible positions, ultimately currently being in as the Recreation Director. His responsibilities currently are to manage about a $7 million budget and associated capital projects and budgets. He's responsible for 4 community centers that include an outdoor pool, 2 outdoor pools and 1 indoor. He runs the entire before and after care for the City of Portland. There's 9 different sites. He has about 60 direct reports to him and also oversees Riverside Golf Club. So he has a ton of experience directly on point. And as I think about where we are in community services and where we want to be, I think Nick really has a great collection of skills and experiences to help manage us in the near term and lead us into the future. So I'm very pleased to have him aboard. He is scheduled to start with us on February 3rd, and my goal was to do this by the 1st of February. So I'm really pleased we were able to pull it all together. I also wanted to update the Route 1, I call it the Resiliency Project, but this is the project that we're working with DOT and a whole bunch of other interested stakeholders. This is looking at the ongoing challenge of Route 1 across the marsh in particular, and the fact that it floods on a regular basis at this point. At least half a dozen times a year, and that's likely to only get greater. Extremely pleased with how quick the state has responded and convened, again, a wide collection of stakeholders that are interested in natural resources and all things related to the marsh, not just finding a transportation solution. And that's worth noting that this isn't just an engineering solution. It's looking at the bigger picture and the marsh and its capabilities to help us manage climate change and those sorts of things. So it's a really fascinating conversation. I was pleased to be part of a meeting in early December. And at that meeting, really kind of the concept emerged with, I'll call it consensus around the room. There were probably 50 people of various perspectives. But essentially, the road itself will be raised about 4 feet across the entirety of the marsh. The existing 4 culverts would be replaced by a bridge span that could be as big as 75 feet in opening. They're still studying and understanding what free flow of water will do on the north side of the marsh. And we were very adamant about insisting that bike and pedestrian concerns are addressed. This is our one chance to do something to provide safe passage across the marsh. That is going to be challenging. They would like to keep kind of within the footprint. If they start to encroach further into the marsh, it presents some regulatory and cost and engineering challenges. Just as an aside, you might have noticed they were doing some test borings last month. It's about 250 feet consistently across the marsh before you hit any kind of solid surface, if you will. And so, as I understand it, one of the concepts they're looking at is this road will actually, the piles will be driven down to a solid base, and this road will be kind of constructed on a series of piles across the marsh. So it's a pretty major undertaking. The working budget is about $44 million at this point. And the state, to its credit, is anxious to apply for a federal Protect grant, as it's called. And that deadline for the grant is February 20th. So things are moving very quickly. Part of that will require the council taking action by way of resolution to authorize, to acknowledge the submission of the grant. I do expect there will be a local match component that I'm still trying to understand. It will be sizable, I suspect, given the cost of the project. But again, it's an opportunity with all the partnership and the opportunity in front of us that I think we need to seize. We also have our congressional delegation, I think, in very good positions going forward in the near term and long term. So look for perhaps as soon as your February 5th meeting, that resolution. Staff and myself are working on better understanding all the particulars, and we want to make sure we advise you at that point. I also want to make you aware of an ongoing enforcement action through by the zoning officer. This is at 10 Burnham Road, and I put it on the agenda for 2 reasons. One, many of the residential abutters have been living with a challenging situation for many years, decades perhaps. And so I want to acknowledge that we're aware of it and working toward hopefully some solutions. But 2, I was initially under the false impression that the council may need to take action if some of you may recall, there's a dangerous building statute that allows municipalities to make a designation. We actually, under that statute, have the ability to go in and clean up the property or cure the violation, and then lien the property to make sure we recoup our funds. In this case, there's a separate statute I've come to now appreciate, dealing with junkyards, and that allows and requires it to go through the court system. So this is something I just want to kind of raise to the awareness of the council and the public that we do intend to continue pursuing this. There's an existing notice of violation and a consent agreement that has not been complied with. So our next step is to file a complaint with the courts to move forward. And I'll continue to keep you apprised of this as we do. A few last things. Our open space plan is now up and available and open for comment. I know Jamie Fitch has been, heavily involved in that. We're receiving comment until the 15th of this month. Is that right? And our plan is to have a workshop and a presentation to council in February. So this is one of the priorities you put forth last year in terms of funding this, and it's approaching the point that it's a real living document, and you'll be able to see it very shortly. I had the pleasure, I'll say, of touring the Cliff Walk. This is the marginal way that surrounds Prouts Neck and has been in existence for well over 100 years. The Cliff Walk has suffered some major damage, interestingly, not due to the January storms that we experienced damage elsewhere to infrastructure. There was another series of events, and the trail has been closed for the better part of a year at this point. And I wanted to see just personally, what the conditions were, because they were described as being impassable. And sure enough, there are areas that are completely gone. And I don't know, even with all the money and the resources in the world, whether they could ever be restored to make them safe again. So there's a committee that they have formed that is tasked with evaluating it and providing a recommendation to the Prouts Neck Improvement Association as to what the future holds. The conversations I was part of and was advocating for is probably 2/3 of the trail that is passable. And so I'm hopeful that they'll do kind of an in and out option. So not that you can go circumvent, but you'll be able to go to essentially the point and then back to Checkley Point. And I strongly encourage them to capture some video, whether it's through drone or otherwise, just so people can appreciate the severity that it's a real thing. So pleased to be part of that. And I know it's been a matter of interest in conversation among past counselors and certainly members of the public. Two final housekeeping things. Remember, this month we're kind of off kilter on our schedule. Next month in February, we'll go back to the first and third Wednesdays. And I just wanted to observe the presence of Kristen Barth. Kristen is our newly appointed, anointed town clerk. And I raise that because one of the great gifts we have is the ability for Kristen to fill in as needed. Tody has got some personal matters to attend to tonight, and so Kristen's able to kind of come in here in short notice, and the reciprocal Tody's available to step across the hall and help as needed. So really blessed to have capable staff that are cross-trained, and we're in a position to serve the community well going forward. So with that, I'm available for questions.
Questions for Tom? Yeah, Counselor Cushing.
Tom, thank you for that report. On the Route 1 resiliency project, I'm wondering, has there been much to sort of bring the public along with this, even at its early stages? I noted, I looked online, read some minutes, sounded very much like, I didn't get the sense that you conveyed, which I'm sure is correct. I got the sense that there were a bunch of engineers trying to keep the road in line. And I didn't hear the word aesthetics or appreciation for the beauty of the marsh or any of those things. And I would anticipate, based on the public comment that we've heard on a variety of topics here, that that's going to be a big deal. And it feels to me like a lesson we should learn from the Gorham Connector and others, is that it's much better to get the public aware sooner rather than later, so that we don't end up with an outcry because we missed something. So,
no, your point's well taken. The fact is there has not been really much of any public outreach. That was a point that I raised and others did at that meeting in December. I think the mode, it's really problem-solving mode right now, and I think there is and needs to be room for other enhancements. For instance, I brought up the bike ped that was not discussed before. Bringing it up, aesthetics I think are an issue that don't necessarily, may not cost much more, but they could be really meaningful to us. The other things I touched on earlier, we need to understand better on the other side, if they open the span larger and more water is able to pass, what impacts upstream are there? We know Payne Road already floods. That's likely to flood sooner and quicker, but there could be private property impacts. And so there needs to be public outreach going forward. Again, I appreciate the folks coming together, focusing on a problem and really problem solving. I don't see that very often. There is a level of motivation that is pretty unique, and I want to seize that. But we do need to find a way to bring the public along, for sure.
Counselor Anderson.
Yeah, Tommy, you mentioned that for that Protect grant, there's going to be a local match and that it's going to be sizable. Any early thoughts on what sizable means, what the range could be?
I think it's going to be less than $1 million, but it's going to be approaching $1 million. 800,000-ish is my working number at this point. I'll refine that.
Other questions for Tom? Okay, seeing none, I will move through the remainder of our agenda. Thank you, Tom. Order number 24-109 is a 7 p.m. public hearing and second reading on the proposed amendments to Chapter 405 zoning ordinance, Section 6 definitions, Section 9 performance standards, Section 18A town and village center districts, TVC, Section 18B Higas Parkway District, HP, Section 18C, Town and Village Centers Transition District, TVC2. Section 18D, Town and Village Fringe Districts, TVC3. Section 18E, Town and Village Centers 4 District, TVC4. Section 19, Regional Business District, B2. Section 19A, General Business District, B3. Section 20, Business Office Research District, BOR. Section 20C, Crossroads Plan Development, CPD. Section 21, Industrial District, I. And with that, Autumn, welcome.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. So we discussed this at your meeting in November. The first reading was held. This is the first in a series of 3 public hearings required for mobile food vendor courts to be permitted. The mobile food vendor courts at this time are contemplated only to be 2 or more, must be on a particular site, and that site would go through our site plan process through the planning board. The second part of this, and I'll just introduce it now so you can ask questions together, is the creation of the license requirement. So the first part says that you can do a mobile food vendor court in all of those districts that the chair just read through. The second part is the actual license creation that will go through the town clerk's office for the actual mobile food vendors at that court. And then the third part of this is to establish the fee for the mobile food vendor license. It's proposed at $250. And just to make it more confusing, we are also addressing the temporary overflow parking lot fee on Chapter 311 in that item. We did have the public hearing with Planning Board earlier, or rather last month. At that meeting, we didn't have any public comment except to request that we also contemplate only permitting 1 mobile food vendor. The planning board was also in agreement with that. They did recommend unanimously approval of this for the public hearing, for the recommendations for the zoning changes, and that we should consider allowing for 1 mobile food vendor in the very near future. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Autumn. Questions for Autumn? Okay, at this time, I will open it up for public comment. If you would like to make public comment on this item, you can approach the podium or raise your hand if you are online. Seeing none, I will close public comment. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there any discussion? Yes, Councilor Doherty.
Yeah, first thing is the agenda should, the first thing you should read is this about a food truck. You know, because all this, if somebody looks at this agenda for tonight, it's like they don't even know we're discussing a food truck. But, and there's a fee on these, you know, they have to, what is the fee gonna be?
We can discuss when we get to order number 24-111, what the specific schedule
Okay,
of
so
fees are.
After we vote to approve it, then we'll discuss fees.
They are separate order numbers, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's fine, you know, have a food truck or whatever. I just want to see what the fees are, and if there should be any fees, why is there fees?
Sure. Other discussion?
So it may be opposed for that reason.
Councilor Cushing.
Just to refresh, what we're talking about in a food court is essentially a pad, if you will, where food trucks can come, park, plug into electricity and water and do their thing. So like the food court in the mall, except that it's on concrete and it's outside. Okay. I think, so we're saying we should do that. We need a few of these, and we're creating some zones in which that can happen.
Exactly.
Okay, good. I like it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Other discussion? Seeing none, I will go ahead and call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, I show that as 6-1. Thank you. Order number 24-110 is a 7 p.m. public hearing and second reading on the proposed new chapter 1015A mobile food vendor ordinance. As Autumn pointed out, this is broken into 3 order numbers. This particular order has to do with the creation of the licenses. With that, I will open it up to public comment. Is there's anyone wishing to make public comment on this item. Seeing none, I will close public comment. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion. Seeing none, I will, oh, certainly. Counselor Cushing.
One question.
Sir.
My understanding is that the licensing requirements are similar to any other food service establishment, with the exception of the fact that these things are on wheels, so the thing accommodates those changes.
Correct. This is geared more for that type of establishment, and it also takes the place of the food handler's license. So you would not have to get both. You would get this instead.
And my recollection is that in the comment, you actually got support from people in fixed-based operations, meaning restaurants and the like, who didn't object and in some cases viewed this as positive.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion or questions? Okay, seeing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? I will show that as 6-1. Thank you. Order number 24-111 is a 7 PM public hearing and second reading on the proposed amendment to Chapter 311 Schedule of Fees to add applicable mobile food vendor fees and modify fee for temporary event overflow parking. At this point, I will open it up for public comment. If there's anyone wishing to make public comment. Seeing none, I will close public comment. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any council discussion? Yes, Counselor Cushing,
I'm going to do it one more time.
go for it.
Playing the rewind button here. This was the place where my colleague and I had some discussion about the fee, and we succeeded in lowering the fee. I think two of us would have liked it lower, but we made progress. Is that a fair summary of the history?
Yes,
Okay,
I would say
good.
so.
Thank you.
Other questions or discussion? Yes, Counselor Bellows.
Yes, is it accurate or fair to say that the rationale for requiring a fee for having a mobile food truck is because they're going to be utilizing some town infrastructure?
No, sir. Actually, it's because of the inspection component and the actual documentation and making sure that everything is up to where it needs to be with code.
Yeah, just wanted to confirm it
Sure.
wasn't arbitrary.
Yep, no, great question.
Thank you.
Other questions or discussion? Yes,
The reason I bring this up is, we had the harbor ordinance, and they said that we're gonna charge a fee of $50 for a mooring. And, you know, the lobsterman was opposed to it. We always had just the lobsterman as a harbor master at Pine Point, and everything was fine. But the town wanted to get bigger and have a full-time employee and have a harbor master. And then they decided that they wanted to rebuild the pier. I mean, Corps of Engineers had built the pier, but they wanted to rebuild and do a new one. And so they wanted a fee on the pier. And so in order to get a mooring, you have to pay a fee. It's added to it. I fish at Black Point, the opposite side of the river. And I don't use the pier. I don't use it at all, ever. You know, well, not ever. I mean, I have been over there, but none of my traps all come Black Point side. And my bait, everything goes from the Black Point side. I don't use it to load my bait. I don't use it to load traps. So the council decided in one of these meetings like this, that they were gonna charge a fee, and it was gonna be 500, it was gonna be $100. And then the next year it went to 500. And the first year I squawked a little bit, it was $100, but it's like, whatever, they can't play City Hall. And so then the next year it got to be 500, and, you know, I came and I looked at the agenda and I says, I don't see anything here on the harbor ordinance. So I didn't come, because it didn't say harbor about fees. It just gave a bunch of mumbo jumbo on the agenda. And So this is my experience in this town with this, and it was just very unfair and unjust to me to charge me a fee for a pier that I don't use. And they decided in the committees, they would just charge all commercial fishermen with a fee to use a pier. I came up to town hall and finally they did it and they sent me the bill and I got $500. It's like, Jesus, I gotta come up, there's something wrong with this. And I tried to meet with Tom and he didn't have time. He didn't want to talk to me. He's right from here to them, away from me. So I got frustrated and I went in the next door to him and I filed for papers for town council. Because I was so frustrated at that day. And I've been frustrated with everything in the town, things that are happening. And I says, well, if you can't complain, you just gotta run and get on and do something. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I just, fees are taxes. It always was, the town would run and everybody would just pay the employees to run and do it, excise tax, everything, you collect excise tax. But we keep collecting more and more money on fees. And you gotta be careful about how you do it. Every new ordinance you do, there's a negative most of the time, there'll be a negative to it that you don't see. As a council, you're doing it, you think you're doing a good thing, but it's not good. There'll be a detriment to it. Food trucks, I think, is a great idea, but it's just the regulation. I don't care if food stops in front of my house. If he can make a living doing it and I buy from him every day, go ahead, so that's my spiel on fees and why I'm, acting the way I am. Thank you.
Welcome. Any other council comment? Okay, seeing none, I will go ahead and call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? I show that as 6-1. Thank you. We are now on to order number 24-114, 7 PM public hearing. This is no action. This is just a public hearing on the proposed amendments to Chapter 405 zoning ordinance to add Section 10A, wetland setbacks and vegetated buffers. At this point, we do have 3 public hearings. They are listed separately. They were posted separately for public notice. And so I will be taking them separately this evening. If there's anyone who wishes to speak to any particular part of this ordinance, you're welcome to do so during public comment during any of the public hearings, but I will call each public hearing separately. So at this point, I will open the first item up for public hearing. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I didn't realize that planning had their presentation ready to go for this evening, so I will turn it over to planning.
Just as Angela takes the podium, I just wanted to orient the council and members of the public, because the next 3 orders, 14, 15, and 16 are all interrelated. We did include kind of most of the substance and content behind order 2414. But in many cases, some of that substance applies to the other 2 as well. So I apologize for that. We're just trying to be as efficient as possible. And we have received some additional comment recently that staff continues to work through and will be in a position to report out at your second reading of that.
Thank you, Angela.
Thank you. I know a lot of this information we went through at first reading, so we tried to pull out. So it's not the full presentation, just trying to see what we've updated, but maybe a few key pieces. And as Tom mentioned, trying to address some of the feedback that we received.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so I'll try to make this quick. Just wanted to start with, again, the Scarborough Marsh as being that central piece that identifies as Scarborough and how this might connect. I know there was some feedback about it's just looking at coastal when you're talking about the marsh. We've had a lot of feedback also from DEP and some of their experts talking about the wetlands inland and how that affects the groundwater, how that feeds the streams, how that feeds the streams and brooks.
that then enter into our marsh. So it's all connected, whether it's right at the coastline or inland. So I just want to make sure that point was clarified. Also wanted to, I know we talked previously about the benefits of wetlands, how those function, what they do. So I'm not going to go back through that, but I wanted to make clear that that's not really the goals of this ordinance. The goal of the ordinance is to protect the wetlands. That's really the main focus by providing some of that buffer and breathing room around it, because we want to keep the wetlands that are protected, that aren't supposed to be filled from unintended impacts. And so that brings me to the direct and indirect impacts. So as construction activity, that's when most people think of kind of those direct impacts. You're digging around it or in it, or as rain events happen, soil washes into them, those type of things. But also once development occurs, there's also the proximity, whether it's trash blowing into the wetlands or pollutants running off these sites. And then indirect is really looking at, say, after the fact, when we have these sites fully developed, you start seeing changes in vegetation or habitat, or even the groundwater or the surface runoff. As we start draining the site around it, you start pulling from that resource. And so you can see some of those indirect effects without a buffer, I should say. And so we've been asked, why now? I think what we're finding and what we're hearing from DEP is actually Scarborough is ranked second in the total number of DEP permits. That's large projects over an acre that are issued by the state. The quote I have in here is from DEP's lead for the stormwater engineering, and that Bangor and Scarborough are in a whole different category in terms of development. So just the sheer kind of number, and looking at, these are the areas that they're asking us to look at more locally and what we can do for protections around that. There was also some conversations around how can this be implemented, some of the technical pieces of it, which I'm not going to get into tonight, but I just wanted to point out that Portland has a 15 and 25-foot setback for some wetlands in their ordinance, and South Portland also has the 25-foot. And then Wyndham has a more complicated scenario, but they also have recently put in higher level of resource protection around their wetlands and streams. And then another had reached out and having conversations with DEP, and they are extremely supportive of this ordinance. And there has been conversations how this may or may not relate to Chapter 500 and the updates that are happening at the state level. That's the state stormwater regulation. And again, I think they're kind of reiterating what I had said earlier, is that they're looking at it as kind of this broad brush, whatever state regulations they set in place is the same for Portland as it is for Washington County towns and things like that. So it's one level, they have to do that kind of lowest level, and that it may be that their experts would like to see larger or higher standards, but they're kind of met with, it needs to balance in the rural areas. And they have pointed out that a lot of times this results in that DEP is overlooking some of the unique features and the protections that are needed in Scarborough specifically, and that they rely on the local level to look at local expertise and what we're dealing with and what we're trying to protect. And so they're asking for us to look at that more to define local level. I'm going to have Autumn jump in at this point.
Thank you. So I'm just going to go back over the process to date. This is just a reminder that we started this in June of 2023. We started with a much greater proposal, and what we've come to tonight, again, I'll just remind you that I think that we've come to a very reasonable solution and a proposal that's before you. These are our current ordinances that contemplate wetland setbacks. Chapter 405 is conservation subdivision. 405, we have performance standards that for private ways as well. And then 406 and 405B, those reference wetland protections. And then 405C shoreland also has a specific set of standards. So our proposed wetland protections that are before you tonight essentially is a 25-foot setback that includes a 15-foot no disturb area. These wetland protections would only apply for new development that has to go through the site plan or the subdivision process. It also has a set of definitions related to natural resources. And then we have defined setback and permitted that within those setbacks, we have permitted activities that may take place. There are also included waivers for wetland crossings. There is also a waiver or a non-applicability clause, if you will, if you already have in process or an approved state or federal permit. So we've also contemplated those situations. So development types, essentially for a new single-family home, just a one-off single-family home, this would not apply. They do not have to go through subdivision or site plan. For a subdivision, it would apply. Multifamily homes, commercial development, it would apply. At our last meeting, I think at the very end, I sort of had an aha moment and I wanted to show you a different way to think about this. And so this is what was presented to the planning board. This is really a look at our zoning and how this would sort of, if you will, taking away and getting down to where this really has an impact. So within the town's land area, 17% of the town is zoned resource protection. And that's the dark green on the map. This would not apply to that part of the town at all. There is already a 250-foot setback established for those wetlands in those areas. The second set, and this was the real meat of what I really wanted to show you, 54% of our town is zoned RF, RFM, and R2. And if you have a certain percentage of wetlands or you're going to fill more than 4,300 square feet, you're already required to do a conservation subdivision. The conservation subdivisions require a 25-foot wetland buffer around your conserved wetland areas. So these areas, very minimal, if any, impact. Through some conversations that occurred after our first reading with some developers, I would like to propose an amendment that completely exempts required conservation subdivisions for these requirements. It's a little bit in the weeds, but if you had an isolated, a smaller isolated wetland, you cannot fill in the conservation subdivision. So having this would sort of double, put an extra burden, I think. And so we will be proposing that before next reading. So overall, 82% of the town has very minimal to no impact from these wetland setbacks. This next slide shows you what's left. So there's about 18% other zones that do not currently have any protections. And yes, these are our growth areas, but they are also the areas in town where you can do the highest density, the most flexibility for uses, and we have impaired and threatened streams. So it is, while it may seem counterintuitive to put setbacks on our growth areas, it's also quite intuitive to protect the resources that we have in place in those areas. Again, this doesn't apply to redeveloped parcels. For redeveloped parcels, there's an applicability clause that says you can't make it any worse than it already was. It doesn't apply, again, if you have a pending or in process or approved state or federal permit. We are exploring an amendment that would apply a reduced overall setback for permitted wetland fill. We'll prepare that and present that before the second reading as well. At this point, we are scheduled for second reading later this month, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Autumn, for walking us through those. Does anyone have any questions for planning? Yeah, Councilor Shoup.
What was the feedback from the planning board?
Oh, I apologize. So the planning board, it's in your staff memo. They held the public hearing. They recommended approval 4-1. They were very much in favor. The 4 and approval were very much in favor and felt that these were very minimal standards.
Thank you. Other questions for Autumn? Yeah, Councilor Cushing.
Thank you. In your presentation, you have section 406, section 4 subdivision ordinance and chapter 405B site plan ordinance, and I'll read the first one back, requires identification of wetlands and assurances that activities will not adversely affect the quality of the wetland. And now, that doesn't apply to the areas that you're talking about?
So that's actually a really good point. This does apply to the areas that I'm talking about, but it's very vague and it's subjective. And so what we are proposing is a very standard set of setbacks. Oftentimes, when you get to the planning board and you bring this subdivision, depending on the board or the specific location, you may have a variation in what they require to meet this standard. So this proposal would set the stage equally and the same across the board.
So respectfully, you could construe that as this is easier because it's one standard,
Correct.
one size fits all. And in some respects, you could have what they call in statistics regression to the mean, moving to the least common denominator. So an unintended consequence could be that a developer who was interested in working in the whole and the big picture could work with you to give you objective assurances that would accomplish this outside of a 25-foot setback. And if I understand correctly, in your last conversation, you had mentioned accommodations like going up higher and doing some other things, you know, fancy ways of filtering, new technology, all of that stuff. And this, so we're sort of making a choice here to say, boom, we're going to protect these wetlands by simply saying, here's the line. When in fact, if I understand correctly, we have an ordinance in place which does capture the spirit of that. And I'd be interested in hearing in your future testimony how, where we've had problems where getting those insurances or coming up with accommodations that achieve the same result. So I'm not suggesting that there's anything bad about trying to get 100% of our land protected. But as you point out, this does take place in an area of town where we have room for significant development, where we have evidence of high density development, which is helping us with other growth goals. And people drive cars, people pollute, people, so it's not just in the big picture. It seems to me that we've made a huge investment in that side of town. And this has the potential for many unintended consequences. That's why when I read this, I said, well, wait a minute. It sounds to me like we already have the power to be sticklers for the detail, to say something like an assurance would be 25 feet or something that accomplishes the same goal. Now that takes a little more time and it's more complicated, but I just wanted to raise that issue. Thank you.
Other comments or questions? Counselor Anderson?
Yeah, just a question maybe for second reading. I love the additional work that staff has done in this deck and how you positioned it tonight. I think it was really, really helpful for me. So thank you for doing that. I really would like to understand in the high growth areas, if possible, like what the impact is to economic development and housing, only because, you know, I think I see we're kind of making a informed decision about preserving our natural resources. And I would personally like to understand what that means, especially as we go into council goal setting, where I anticipate we're going to talk more about affordable and workforce housing and what we need to do there. So I'd really like to understand that consequence. And I would also like to understand, you know, especially as we're looking for land for the school, like what does this specific thing mean in our school search for land? And what could the consequences be? What would that mean as we're trying to build a new school, and how would that be impacted by this, depending on the type of land that we purchase?
I would add that this ordinance also doesn't prohibit you from doing any wetland fill. So if the town, for instance, were to move forward with a site that had significant wetland on it, we could go through state and federal permitting to fill that, and we would not have any impacts from this. And if I could just address Counselor Cushing just a bit, anytime an ordinance says assurances, that is just a place from a development perspective that is really hard to argue once the developer comes in, because if it's not if it's not a known, we have front setbacks, for instance, we have a 50-foot front yard setback, and it's known. When you buy a piece of property and you talk to your design engineer about what can go on that, the first thing you do is you put your setbacks down, and that's your box. You work within that box. And the word assurance says, I'm not really sure what that means. Let's do minimal. And then you get down this path, and then you get in front of the planning board. Now, if you do it right and you come before us and you have a pre-application, we will tell you what assurance means. But what often happens, and we've been very successful with that in the last 2 years, we've had people that actually have complied with this before it's even in place. But if you don't, and you get right in front of the planning board, and then it becomes a hard place for planning board, I think, to be, because you have a developer who has spent a lot of money and time and energy, and it may be a great project, but those assurances may not be exactly what you had in mind. And it puts them, I think, in a hard spot, to where I believe if you have something defined, where you have your minimums defined, and it's much easier to work within. It's just my commentary.
So would you agree that there is a price to be paid for flexibility? And so what you're saying is that a smart developer is out there watching this meeting right now. Okay, and they understand and they learn about the process, and they do what you said with smart stuff. And I personally don't have a lot of sympathy for the planning board, who has to deal with a not so smart developer who comes in and hasn't taken the time to understand what we actually mean by assurances. And I think that what I'm hearing from you is that the message ought to be that you need to start working with us early and often. This is what we do. My concern is that when you put in this hard, fast rule, it certainly does make it simpler, but it may have unintended consequences, which in fact eliminate stuff. And then when I hear you say, that's okay, you can always fill them in. That doesn't strike me as, I mean,
Well,
I understand what you're saying, but that's one way to deal with the problem, which is fill them and fill out a couple more forms and, you know.
you can do that now. And so I think that's back to my point, is this is a very minimal and really reasonable approach to address wetlands in our town. And I think that's important for me to say. It came from here and it's here.
I understand.
And it's getting whittled down the more and more we speak about it. And I think it'll be even a little bit less at second reading. We're working on some, proposed amendments. But at the end of the day, I think having it defined, because if I were a smart developer and I was listening to this conversation, I would say I'll do nothing, because they can't get this ordinance passed. And so then for the past year and a half, I've been able to say we're working on an ordinance, and just be aware that we're working on an ordinance and this is the proposal. But if we don't get it approved, I don't have that to be able to say anymore. And I mean no disrespect,
No, that's okay. I'm actually gonna jump in, because the purpose is for us to have a public hearing. And so unless the council has specific questions, Counselor Cushing, I look forward to a lively discussion at our second reading on January 22nd. But for right now, I'm gonna go ahead and quiet council discussion and open this up to the public hearing. So if you would like to make public comment on this item, please approach the podium. If there are multiple people, and I suspect there are, who would like to speak, you can go ahead and form a line kind of along that more narrow corridor, and it just kind of helps us keep the meeting going. I will remind everyone to please address me as the chair. Please state your name and your address for the public record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes, please.
Good evening, Dan Bacon here on behalf of M&R Holdings and the Downs Development. Happy New Year to everyone, and congratulations to the new counselors. Firstly, I just wanted to say that I'm personally and professionally dedicated to responsible, smart growth development. That's why I'm working on the Downs project and some other projects. And part of that is being sensitive to Scarborough Marsh and the tributaries to Scarborough Marsh. So this is of front of mind for me and our team. Second, we had a site walk, invited the council on a site walk back in September. The council membership has changed kind of dramatically since then. That site walk, I know a few of you were able to attend, was intended to really walk through the details of all the environmental measures that are being taken with the Downs project, both ones that have been built and ones that are planned. Given the significant makeup change with the council, I wanted to propose the concept of having another site walk or a workshop type format before you actually take action on this ordinance, because there's a lot of relevance in terms of what we've done and have been doing or planning to do that ties off to this ordinance. And some things couldn't be possible that are strong environmental measures that with this ordinance being in place in the future. In terms of some quick points, I did provide the council with a memo through Councilor Anderson. Hopefully you had a chance to review it. I just wanted to hit three high-level points. One is, I certainly agree that this ordinance makes a lot of sense for a variety of development projects. I think it's a little bit too one broad brush and one size fits all, and would suggest a few things to consider. One is projects that are addressing the goals of the setback, but in different ways, warrant some flexibility. And what I mean by that is projects installing gravel wetlands, projects doing LID stormwater that's directing all the stormwater to those BMPs and not to the wetlands, don't necessarily require the setback for that purpose. Secondly, I wanted to just highlight the importance of projects going through the DEP site law process and the fact that in that process, there's a lot of value-based decisions made by DEP. High value wetlands and resources get significant setbacks. Low value may have minimal setbacks, so that in growth areas, you can achieve all of the land use goals the town has under its comprehensive plan. So having some flexibility on larger projects is important so that projects can proceed and protect the highest value resources and protect the marsh. And then lastly, I know my time is running out. It's really important for the ordinance to be coordinated in terms of the review process with the DEP and Army Corps process. When you go in for wetland impacts, it's critical to have the local process mirror that so you're not in conflict with the state rules, and that applicants have kind of a clear path in terms of how they proceed and aren't caught between review agencies. So my time's up. Thanks for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chairwoman. My name is Crescencia Maurer, and I live at 20 Meeting House Road here in Scarborough. I'm coming out to really voice my support for this ordinance and how important I think it is, and that in fact there are quite considerable benefits and sort of push back on this attempt to whittle it down. The primary reason I think is because the solutions that were good enough to manage flooding and polluted runoff in the past are no longer adequate today, in my mind. Why? Because the reality has changed on the ground. In the last decade, we've seen increases in 100-year storm events. They're not once every 100 years. We have 200 or 300-year storm events a year. Rainfall that is more concentrated, and so with more severe runoff, and rising water levels in our marshes and along our shorelines. So what have the consequences been? More bacterial contamination, leading to prolonged closure of some of our clam beds, an influx of Phragmites that is choking off parts of our marsh. And I want to emphasize the connectivity of the system. It isn't just wetlands right along, it's all our streams and our rivers that are leading into, and all the wetlands. There's a real connectivity there. And we're also seeing road closures that threaten evacuation routes and public safety. So how could the increased setbacks help? A wider buffer will slow pollution runoff, and provide more absorption for excess rainfall, and prevent private property from being built in areas where flood risks are rising. So this is something we're going to be seeing, water levels rising. So I think the setback also provides protection for private property in the future. And that's something to think about. And it's only going to get worse. This is not a static situation. So I really believe that a wider setback gives Scarborough the cushion it needs to manage these setbacks in the futures. Let's be proactive, not reactive. And I really urge you to support the 25-foot setback. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Aubrey Strauss. I live on Beach Ridge Road in Scarborough. I am speaking tonight in support of this ordinance, and there's 3 points I'd like to make specifically. The reason I even got interested in this is because I saw some comments about the fact that this represents a taking of land, and I would like to push back on that. This is definitely not a one-size-fits-all. It is establishing a bare minimum. It's a 25-foot wide buffer, 10 feet of which can be disturbed. So we're really talking about a 15-foot wide non-disturbance buffer just between your active area and the wetland. That's from me to the edge of that table. So the first point I'd like to make is that if your project can't handle 15-foot wide strip between your work and the wetland, you're probably trying to fit too much on your property. The second point I'd like to make is that I've heard comments that, well, this is DEP's job. DEP is the expert and they have the Natural Resources Protection Act, NERPA, to address this. That's true. However, NERPA really only covers what are considered high-value natural resources, wetlands that are considered special significance. But DEP established NERPA to be a bare minimum. It represents the lowest common denominator because it applies everywhere in the state. It applies to towns that have hardly any development. It applies to towns that have no wetlands. And it also applies in Scarborough, where if there's one thing we have, it is high quality wetlands. We have a lot to lose if the quality of our wetlands is reduced because we have Scarborough Marsh. Other towns and groups have gone beyond what NERPA requires. They have said, okay, NERPA doesn't care what you do in that 25-foot buffer, but we do. And they have enacted more stringent regulations to protect their value wetlands. No one is saying we should wait for DEP to go back and update NERPA to make it more stringent. DEP doesn't really have any plans in doing that. We don't have to wait for them because there's no conflict between this ordinance and what DEP requires in NERPA. The third point I wanted to make is I've heard in some comments and on other projects, this argument that we need affordable housing. And this ordinance or this rule or this ask really is a barrier to us developing affordable housing. So what I would say to that is the setback, minimum wetland setbacks already apply most areas in this community. This is just catching up and providing a level playing field for those other zones where it doesn't apply. But if we allow affordable housing development to happen only in places by approving waivers and reducing natural resource protection, what we end up with is affordable housing concentrated in areas with lower quality environments, with reduced environmental standards. And I think that becomes an environmental justice issue. I believe that all types of people deserve to live in an area with protected natural resources, good water quality. So I think that's what this ordinance does. It makes the setbacks and those water quality protections and natural resource protections apply equally to all types of development. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for having us. My name is Kathleen Miller. I reside at 277 Broad Turn Road. I'm a member of this Conservation Commission, and I'm here to voice my support for the proposed ordinance to protect the wetlands that are so vital to the health of Scarborough's water, land, and diverse species. Our wetlands are some of our town's most valuable assets. They filter our water, they protect our streams and rivers from pollution, they provide essential habitat to species up and down the food web. Healthy wetlands benefit all of us. And while they may not fill our bank accounts, They provide economic benefits to the town and its residents in ways that are both measurable, i.e. tourism and other types of things that we can see in dollars, and incalculable, such as the health benefits of living in a natural area that is accessible to us. Beyond the ways that healthy wetlands benefit us, I believe that it is our moral obligation to protect these wetlands for future generations of Scarborough residents. We all talk about how we love the quality of life here, and our descendants should also benefit from that quality of life. It is a false choice to say that wetland protection impedes development. We can build quality, affordable housing for a community that needs it, and we can protect natural wetlands in the process. And I say natural here because I don't believe that gravel wetlands are the same thing or can serve the same function in the ecosystem as natural wetlands in their natural state. Finally, I will leave you with these findings from an EPA report on the connectivity of streams and wetlands to downstream waters. Quote, "The scientific literature clearly shows that wetlands and open waters in riparian areas and floodplains are physically, chemically, and biologically integrated with rivers via functions that improve downstream water quality. These systems act as effective buffers to protect downstream waters from pollution and are essential components of river and food webs." End quote. And, quote, "There is ample evidence that many wetlands and open waters located outside of riparian areas and floodplains, even when lacking surface water connections, provide physical, chemical, and biological functions that could affect the integrity of downstream waters. Some potential benefits of these wetlands are due to their isolation rather than their connectivity." Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Dan Shapiro, 5 Highland Pines Road. I came to a hearing on this topic in December, and somebody at that hearing made the point about if you build right up to a line that you're trying to protect, and somebody surveys incorrectly or goes over a little bit or does something a little bit wrong, all of a sudden you're in the area. And I thought about that quite a bit. I had some work done on my house recently, and I thought that we had provided pretty ample space for the contractor. By the way, really nice people. I don't mean anything against them. Really ample space for them to put materials and bring equipment in. And despite even visible protections of things that we had planted, cages and things like that in the yard to try to protect them, they couldn't always do that. I think I heard some comments earlier on responsible developers, good developers versus bad developers and things like that. And I think a lot of the developers, I mean, I don't know any developer that comes in irresponsibly and trying to do things that don't make sense or are wrong. But those same people who come in before the planning board or before the council aren't the same people who are building, right? They're not the same ones who are out there digging or moving equipment or moving materials. And it's every level that you go beyond this room, it gets harder and harder to make sure everybody understands exactly what's been committed and make sure all of those things actually happen. I work in large scale energy development, and I really appreciate clear expectations. So I think plenty of people here talking about the advantages, the environmental advantages. I'm not an environmental expert, but I really do appreciate clear expectations in life, not only in regulations, but certainly in regulations too. So that kind of conversation about saying reasonable, taking reasonable measures, and let's clarify what those reasonable measures are so that people know, and we're setting those clear expectations for people to be successful here. All of that said, I think one thing that could be considered, it's a little bit of a shift of that kind of reasonable measure language, is establishing that setback, but also creating discretion for the planning board to make a variance for that. It's a little bit different way. It's starting with the clear expectation, but still giving some authority to make a different decision if some additional reasonable measures that they deem reasonable and have the opportunity to clarify are in place. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome.
Hi, my name's Tom Nolan. I live at 7 Waldron Drive. I'm here to speak in support of the ordinance and to speak in support of increasing the scope and the distance of the setbacks for the ordinance. I will not revisit all the good points that people have made about the economic and certainly, more importantly, the environmental benefits of the wetlands and the marsh. But I will say, development in Scarborough is going to be just fine. I doubt that there is anything that any of us in this room could do to really slow down or to discourage development in Scarborough, except maybe make Scarborough a less attractive place for developers to come, like destroying the marsh and the waterfront. That probably would do it. So please think very carefully. All due respect. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Rich Jordan. I'm a professional wetland scientist and the president of Flycatcher LLC. We're a 25-person environmental company located in Yarmouth. Here, I work for the Downs. I've been permitting and doing all the wildlife and wetlands work on the Downs for about 8 years now. Really not as a longtime wetland scientist with a staff of 20 additional wetland scientists. I'm not going to stand here and say wetlands or buffers are not important. They certainly are. And I think that's very much reflected in sort of what we do day in and day out as consultants, and we're working with developers all over the state. The process of identifying the least environmentally damaging practicable alternative for a project is a complicated process, and it requires a lot of data and a lot of collection of data and a lot of analysis of data for each site. So for a large project, we go out and we map the wetlands, we delineate the lines. We then reach out to the agencies, Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, Maine Natural Areas Program, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We take that back to the project designers and we say, you have a project need, there's a certain amount of land, here are the resources. The Army Corps recognizes that the Army Corps and the DEP recognize that there are going to be circumstances where there is a project need, everybody agrees this needs to be built, and because of any number of reasons, whether it's infrastructure, land, slopes, et cetera, there may not be an ability to completely avoid wetland impacts. So our goal is then, when we can't avoid, we look to minimize, and if we can't minimize, we look to mitigate those impacts and try to reduce impacts as much as possible. And we do that generally by doing a functional analysis of those wetlands. We're primarily saying, okay, well, we need to fit this box into a box that's a little bit too small with the wetlands. So we try to identify where we can push development in order to have the least damaging effect on wetlands on the site, wetlands beyond the site, and then obviously regionally significant wetlands downstream like the marsh. So we've followed that process throughout sort of every project we work on. But one thing I guess my overarching goal in sort of describing all that is that there is a process by which there's flexibility to use the field-based science that we have to identify those areas when there are needs, when you can fully articulate, stand behind it with boots on the ground information plus the best available science that impacts this area, although maybe close to a wetland or in some cases in a wetland. Those impacts may allow us to push development away from other higher value areas on the same site. In general, I guess I would just recommend, if possible, to change this from a no waiver buffer setback to more of a consultation zone where there's some flexibility in there for applicants and the planning board to apply that science. So.
Great. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Brian Rayback. I'm an environmental lawyer, represent a variety of developers in Scarborough, including the Downs. these kinds of issues, we have a tendency to polarize sort of for and against, black hat, white hat. In my view, that's not really productive. It's also not helpful or not applicable here. You've got developers in this community who are trying to do smart development in the right way that is protective of wetlands. And I think you also have a town staff and you have council and a lot of people in the public who are looking to protect wetlands. Those aren't mutually exclusive goals. You can do both. So our view is that creating setbacks as the only tool you have is a little bit of a rough way to do it. It's a crude way. Rich just talked about having some opportunity for nuance. I think that will be helpful to you. I don't know why you wouldn't give developers an opportunity to come in and prove that what they're doing is protective of a wetland. You have professional staff, you have access to professional peer reviewers who developers pay for that can help you with that. So it's not a situation where the simplicity of the setback is required because you can't understand what's being proposed or evaluate it in an intelligent way. You can do that. Another thing to consider when you think about unintended consequences is by allowing wetland fills as permitted by the DEP and the Corps, but otherwise having rigid setbacks for all other wetlands, you are, like it or not, creating a perverse incentive for developers to go ahead and ask DEP and the Corps to permit a little more wetland impact, right? Maybe they'll get it, maybe they won't, but in some situations, the odds are they'll get it, right? And then they're going to end up unexpectedly with an unintended consequence that there could be more fills. I don't think you need to go there. Another concern is how to dovetail new rules with existing permitting. At the Downs, for example, they have a phased DEP permit under the site law. It doesn't authorize every single wetland fill yet, but it does map out where the grading is going to be, where's the site, where's the stormwater management going to be. And they've been working off of that for years. So it does feel a little bit like the goalposts are moving for them. And that can be difficult and frustrating when you've already made investments. Perhaps there's a way to adjust that not only are permitted projects exempt, but if you haven't one of these phased permits, there would be some accommodation for that too. Finally, another thing to think about with the dovetailing concept is there are exemptions under state and federal law where wetland impacts are so small that no DEP or Corps permit is required. You might think about incorporating that into your system right now. Right now it does not, but that might be appropriate as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Robin Saunders, 150 Highland Avenue. I just want to applaud our town planner and our town engineer for bringing this forward. It's about time. My first point I'd like to make is that 25 feet is the least we can do for the Scarborough Marsh. It is a bare minimum, and boy, we have a lot of smart people who live in Scarborough, and I want to thank them all for coming out to talk tonight about this really important subject. And a little tongue in cheek, I want to congratulate you all. You've all been mansplained to as if you're on the planning board. So a service that I very much cherished for a number of years. And I'm now still on the long range planning committee. And I thank you all for tuning in to all that we're doing there, because we have a lot to think about in front of us. We have low impact development standards that, Angela and the planning board have been talking to us about. We have stormwater standards that are being renegotiated right now at DEP, and the town is fortunate enough to have a stormwater engineer that's been recognized throughout New England as the best in the business. Those are the people that I trust. Those are the people that I listen to. And number two, I just want to, remember number one was 25 feet is the least we can do, okay? Number two is, I want to answer Councilor Anderson's question where, what does it mean? What does this 25-foot setback mean to housing, affordable housing, our school search? It just means that we need to work with a developer who isn't directing an engineer to overload the site with pavement, structure, and a bunch of sidewalks and infrastructure. Instead, we'd rather work with a developer and an engineer who values and honors the land for the valuable ecosystem services that it provides to the town. Whether it's flooding, management, or water quality, ecosystem services are far undervalued. And I really hope that this is the council that gets that straight. Number 3, what do we want our town to look like? What are our values? What do our values reflect? Last time I looked, our brand is what? A marsh bird? Yeah. So let's put our money where our mouth is, and 25 feet is the least we can do. And I'd really like to see it go up to 50.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Randy Hogan, I'm the Chair of the Conservation Commission. Just thanks for the opportunity to speak on this wetlands protection ordinance. It's not just about environmental protection, it's about ensuring the long-term safety and success of everyone in our community. It's about protecting something we can't afford to lose, our wetlands, especially the inland and seemingly isolated ones. They play a critical role in the health and safety of our entire community. And as my fellow commission member pointed out, according to the EPA, even wetlands that lack visible connections to rivers, streams, or marsh, they provide vital physical, chemical, and biological functions that impact downstream waters. And in some cases, their isolation makes their role even more valuable. Wetlands are our nature's safety net. They soak up rain like sponges. They filter pollutants. They recharge groundwater and ensure a steady water supply for ecosystems and people. And this means that inland wetlands, even those outside the floodplains, are not just important, they're essential. They protect us from flooding, from pollution, and habitat loss. Without buffers and setbacks, these critical systems are left vulnerable to irreparable harm, and their benefits are lost forever. The experts widely agree that 25 to 50-foot setback is the bare minimum for meaningful protection. These modest buffers give wetlands the space they need to function without interference from development. You've heard the argument that engineered systems like gravel wetlands can replace natural wetlands, but here's the truth. No human-made system can replicate the full range of benefits that natural wetlands provide. Once a wetland is lost, its ability to absorb water, filter pollutants, and support life is gone for good. This ordinance, it's not about stopping development. It's about balance. It ensures that we grow responsibly while protecting the wetlands that safeguard our homes, our businesses, and our natural resources. Without this ordinance, the costs of flooding, polluted water, and environmental damage will fall on all of us. So let me leave you with this. If we don't protect our inland wetlands now, the damage will ripple downstream and into our future. If you don't pass this ordinance now, we'll all pay the price later. Let's protect our wetlands and ensure that as Scarborough grows responsibly, we are preserving the resources that protect us all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Elise Strohmeyer, and I live at 20 Meeting House Road in Scarborough. And I can't say that I came here this evening expecting that I was gonna stand up and say anything, but as I've listened to the valuable points that other people have made this evening, although I didn't come with any sort of articulate statement, I still feel responsible to voice my opinion in my community, and I would like to voice my support for this ordinance. As a young person, I really would like to see the future of the marsh protected. I've gone away to college, and it has made me appreciate the natural environment of this town so much more. There are very few other places quite like honestly anywhere near like it in my opinion. So I don't have a lot to say. I didn't prepare anything, but I would really like to voice my support of the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So my name is Sylvan Thorncraft, and I live at 23 Chamberlain Road. And Madam Chair, thank you for making space for us to speak this evening. So I also don't have prepared statement, but I have lived in Scarborough a long time. My dad was on the Long Range Planning Committee about 40 years ago. So I have seen a lot of things here. And as Mr. Hall spoke to earlier, we're going to be dealing with topics around wetland a lot from now on, and things are going to change a lot. And so everything we can do that will protect these interstitial places that will hold the water when they come in so that we can stay more resilient are going to be very important. So this very minimal setback, it's also a statement to say that this is something that's important to us as a town and that we have our finger on the pulse and that we're going to keep taking care of these places. There's been a lot of words spoken this evening about why that's important from a lot of different perspectives. And I think that, as it's been said, making affordable places for people to live is also important, but we have a huge responsibility to take care of this place so that it will stay healthy and continue to nurture us. So thank you all for the work that you do to care for this place and for everyone who's here because they care about this topic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Steve Panetta. I live at 16 Goldwood Drive in Scarborough. I've lived there for 25 years, past president of the Friends of Scarborough Marsh. And there've been some good points made, so I'm not going to repeat those. My only concern, or my main concern, is that if you affect these wetlands, you degrade these wetlands, you fill these wetlands, you minimize the buffer, you're going to allow more nutrients from fertilizer, lawn fertilizer specifically, to go into the water, rivers and streams in the watershed that feeds the Scarborough Marsh. Over the past 3 decades, approximately 5% of the marsh has been invaded by invasive species, namely Phragmites. That's because we are discharging stormwater directly onto the marsh plain, and there are elevated nutrients in the rivers and streams that feed the marsh, including the stormwater runoff. And if you eliminate, the more wetlands you eliminate upstream, the less nutrient protection you're going to get. And in my view, 25 or 15-foot vegetated buffer is just a minimal protection that you can add. If a developer can't build a project on parcel or landmass and protect wetlands, then maybe the project shouldn't go forward with the density that's proposed. For a lot of developments, smaller developments that come for review, the developers can't afford to build gravel wetlands like the Downs properties that are going to treat nitrogen. And so that's I think where most of the impact's going to occur if you don't have these buffers in these smaller developments that can't afford to build gravel wetlands or implement low impact development standards. So anyway, I urge you to support the 15-foot and 25-foot setback. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Welcome.
Hi, Marvin Gates, 423 Black Point Road. I was at the first reading. I attended the planning board meeting, spoke at both, tired of hearing my voice, I think. Yet I do want to speak again on behalf of, I'm very much in favor of this minimal standard, support it completely. I want to represent in a certain way more even than the marsh itself. There are those of us who live downstream. And none of this conversation is about any of those people. It's all about the people who want to develop upstream. I'm all for them, but not beyond this 25-foot setback. Certainly not saying I'm for minimizing that. I just think that you have to consider the properties, the people who will be impacted. And I'm sure you do. And I'm appreciative of the work you're doing. Just wanted to say that. And finally, listening tonight, when the conversation, again, with enormous respect for all of you, veers towards the subject of abstract, undue consequences, is that the right word? Unexpected consequences. I think you really run into some murky waters if that's the subject. I heard one of the counselors ask the town planner, you will consider that there are unintended consequences to something. There are unintended consequences all over the place, Madam Chair. So when we get to the second reading and the conversation drills down, I urge us to speak in terms that we can understand and that are more concrete and less abstract, as many people have done tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, Rocky
Welcome.
Risbera, 287 Black Point Road. I wasn't going to speak tonight, but giving you a lot of testimony. We've got some experts here in the audience, both for and against. I'm hearing some changes are being made to the ordinance. I'm not aware of what those changes are, but Autumn has alluded to some. We've looked at the ordinance. We're very confident that there are unintended consequences that will affect the downs, and it will force us to do things differently. I think there's some problems with the ordinance, and I think there are some counselors that are new to the council. I think a workshop is in order, and if we had a workshop, it would give us a chance to show you where those holes are and where those conflicts are. And we'd appreciate the opportunity to address the council in a less formal setting and show you the issues that we have with the ordinance. So that's all I have to say tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We did have one hand online earlier. There she is. Hi. So Liam will go ahead and allow you to speak. Welcome.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, Mo.
Perfect. My name is Mo Erickson. I live at 288 Pine Point Road, and I certainly am a supporter of this 25-foot buffer. I wish it could be 100, but you know, I've said in the past at the first reading when I was there, my family are shellfish harvesters, and everything you do to the wetland directly affects my family and how they make a living. I live down here in Pine Point, and I see lobstermen and clam diggers go by me all the time. And what we do to our wetlands directly affects if we're going to get clams or how our lobsters and oysters are going to be. Are they going to thrive down there in the river, or are they going to die? The more we fill in our wetlands, the more pesticides and poison run into our marsh, and it's going to kill everything. It does give me some concern when I hear people talk about getting waivers or variances, or heck, we just might fill parts of it in. That's real scary. It reminds me of in 2016 when the campground that was right near me filled in a bunch of wetlands because that's just what they wanted to do. So they did that. And surely they ended up paying a fine, but you know, the damage was done to the wetlands out behind Bailey's campground. And you don't get to make that up. Once you fill in the wetlands, you cause a detrimental effect to the environment. And I'm pretty sure that gravel wetlands somehow that seems like an oxymoron to me, but, anyway, I don't know how beneficial gravel wetlands are. But nonetheless, I appreciate everyone's hard work. I just want you to know that there are, I think, a lot of people who do support this setback. Maybe they don't know to come and speak. I wish we could get it more publicized out there. So in any case, thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the room or online wishing to speak?
Madam Chair, I just want to indicate we had a resident provide to the town clerk some written testimony earlier this week. It's from Kate Borduis. I will not read it entirely. She did ask for it to be included in the record, and suffice to say, she's in support of the proposal.
Certainly, thank you. Do we have a new hand? Yep. Welcome, Mr. Dickinson. Mr. Dickinson, you're on mute. I'm going to give you 10 more seconds, Mr. Dickinson. Okay, I think I have a new emerging person in the room, and so I will go ahead and go back to the room, and then Mr. Dickinson, if you can figure out your computer, we'll come back to you.
I want to thank the chair and the council for hearing our voices. My name is Tillman. I'm at 23 Chamberlain Road, and I was involved in the Gorham Connector dialogue and was really passionate, and only found out about the proposal with the wetland setbacks recently. And my friend who mentioned that the setback was 25 foot, my first gut reaction was, that's all? 25 foot? I appreciate that Scarborough's a town that cares about its marsh. It is one of the beautiful things, and it is perhaps the one thing that we need to protect more than anything. It does impact the quality of life. You've heard all these points. But I feel like a developer who perhaps doesn't even live in Scarborough and who may be developing Scarborough, housing or businesses that will be affected by the marshland regulation. A conscientious developer could probably do plenty of good work, and if they're respectful of the wetland, that a little wiggle room seems to make sense. I imagine a not so conscientious developer could do plenty of damage to the wetland, even with 100-foot setback, perhaps. I'm not a scientist. I'm just a citizen. I've lived in Scarborough for 14 years, and every time I drive across the marsh, I give thanks to the fact that it hasn't been developed, because you develop it and then it's Back Bay, Boston a couple 100 years ago. And I love Scarborough as it is. The growth will continue, and I salute developers that care about this town, that perhaps live in this town, and so their quality of life has a lot to do with how we protect our marsh. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you. Mr. Dickinson, would you like to try again?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, sir.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
All right, so I am trying to work on a project here at the Light Industrial District, and this proposal, as mentioned in previous testimony, will impact potentially impact negatively financially and overall the development of the light industrial district on the acreage that I have for development. So I'd like to second Mr. Risbera's request for a workshop for this ordinance, so we can bring us all together and really hash down on these details. I'm not necessarily opposing this, but I think there's some things that could be worked over and make it more amenable to all parties, all stakeholders. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. As I mentioned before, we do have 2 additional public hearings listed on our agenda. I would respectfully request that if you have already spoken and you've made a kind of general public comment, that you do not repeat and come to the podium a second time. However, if there is something specific in the order that you would like to address, the time to do so will be after I announce the public hearing. So order number 24-115 is a 7 p.m. public hearing on the proposed amendments to Chapter 405B Site Plan Review Ordinance Section 5, Site Conditions and Environmental Considerations to add reference to wetland setbacks. At this time, if anyone would like to make public comment. Seeing none, I will go ahead and close the public hearing. Order number 24-116 is a 7 p.m. public hearing on the proposed amendments to Chapter 406 Subdivision Ordinance Section 4, Purpose, Interpretation, and Review Criteria. Anyone wishing to make public comment? With that, I will go ahead and close the public comment. Thank you all very much for your respectful and articulate comments this evening. Your participation is very much appreciated. Order number 25-001 is a 7 p.m. public hearing in action on the new request for a cannabis establishment license from Alan Meyer, doing business as Daily Provider LLC, located at 4 Commercial Road for a medical cannabis cultivation facility. Liam.
Yeah, thank you. So just by way of background, this facility located at 4 Commercial Road is a existing licensed facility. They've been licensed. I think they were one of the first groups that were licensed back in 2020 when the ordinance came online. When they originally licensed, they were licensed as a medical cannabis cultivation business. They subsequently made a transition to adult use cultivation. Now they're proposing to move back to a split between adult use and medical. The cannabis canopy, if you will, is unchanged. There's no expansion here. It's simply a change in use. Our zoning ordinance that allows for legacy use within the 1,000-foot buffer does not prescribe or differentiate between medical cannabis and adult use cannabis. It just simply says cannabis cultivation. So with that rationale, there's no change in ownership. It's simply a change in what market they're growing cannabis for and is otherwise permitted with the existing ordinance.
Thank you very much, Liam. At this time, I'll open it up for public comment. Hi, welcome.
Hi, congratulations to the new council members. Happy New Year. My name's Jill Cohen. I'm an attorney at Verrill. I'm here tonight on behalf of Alan Meyer. I just wanted to let you know I was here representing him tonight. As Liam said, there's no expansion, no change at all. This is mostly a paperwork change. This facility has been running forever without incident in Scarborough, and I would ask that you approve this license tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this item? Seeing none, I will close public comment. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Any council discussion? Seeing none, I will go ahead and call the vote. All those in favor? I show that as unanimous. Thank you. Item, where are we? Order number 25-002 is a 7 p.m. public hearing in action on the new request for a combined massage establishment massage therapist license from Cassandra Colston, located at 20 Muzzy Road. This is coming to us from the clerk's office.
This is just so the applicant can conduct business in the town according to the ordinance. The application has been reviewed by the town clerk's office and found complete.
Thank you very much. Anyone wishing to make public comment on this item? Seeing none, I will close public comment. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Okay.
It was John seconding his own motion to speed this along. Thank you. Is there any council discussion? A bunch of chokers. Seeing none, I will go ahead and call the vote. All those in favor? I will show that as unanimous. Thank you. Resolution 25-001 is an act on the request from Quality Housing Coalition, QHC, for a Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, application in support of the implementation of QHC's Housing Navigation Program, Project Home, in Westbrook, Scarborough, and Yarmouth. And this is coming to us from the town manager.
Yes, the town participates in the county's CDBG program. We are not eligible to participate directly. We're a non-entitlement community. In this instance, we were approached, partner communities of Yarmouth and Westbrook taking the lead. I've also kind of co-signed on this. What is required is the legislative body take action, authorizing submission, really sponsoring this application. The organization is one that I was not previously familiar with. I've since met with them on 2 occasions and am very impressed with the sort of quality of services that they provide in the county, and I strongly endorse and request that you support this.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Is there any council questions or comment for Tom? Questions before yeah, go ahead.
I don't have questions specific to the item per se, but I have a question, Tom, about what you just said, and kind of when I was looking into this. When you said we're not a non-entitled program or a non-entitled community, what does that mean? Because when I was looking at the CBDG website, I was seeing South Portland was in there, Gorham was in there. And so I'm just interested to understand why we are non-entitled, and does that mean we can't access this program? Because some of the things I saw that they were doing were things like supporting after school rec, both in South Portland and Gorham, and general assistance. And so those just seem like things we would want access to. And given this is a Cumberland County program and the taxes that we pay to Cumberland County, I just don't understand why we don't have greater access to this for our own purposes.
Yeah, I think I've confused the matter. And it's worth revisiting. This is based on socioeconomics and demographics in terms of whether we have direct access to apply for and receive CDBG funds directly from the federal government. The alternative, which is where we're at, is those funds are funneled or sent to the Cumberland County. We have access to apply for them through those means.
Okay.
But your point is well taken. As our population grows and our statistics may be changing, it's worth looking to see if, and perhaps we could apply and have direct access to these funds.
Yeah, I'm just bringing that up because in the finance committee, we've talked more about pursuing grants where we can. And even though this is its own opportunity, it just made me think more about the conversation we had, and are we taking advantage of this for ourselves, not just for this project, but for other needs of the town?
I'll just remind you, the most recent one that comes to mind is we had, I think, a $25,000 CDBG grant specifically for us to study homelessness. So that's an example of us getting access to having a project for us. This is really just providing sponsorship so this nonprofit has access to these funds.
Great. Any other questions for Tom? Okay, seeing none, is there anyone wishing to make public comment? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the grant? Support the resolution? That's what we're looking for. Any council discussion? Seeing none, I call the vote. All those in favor? Show that as unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Old business, order number 24-125 is second reading on the 2025 bond order for municipal and school capital improvements. Welcome back, Norm.
This item is second reading to authorize the borrowing of GO bonds to support the capital projects listed in the bond order. Materials are the same as you saw first read, so no change to this.
Perfect, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Norm? Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
A refresher to what it is, what is it that they're buying, what have we got?
The project list in your packet is capital improvement projects that we've spent the money for. And now we're grouping those CIP projects together, going to the bond market to borrow.
That was from this November's election.
No, these are
It
separate.
bonds. There wasn't those.
No, the November's election was merely the authorization to borrow when we spend on those projects,
Oh,
because those are projects
so it's
that,
been voter approved.
yeah,
Either voter or council approved.
yeah.
Yes, they all have authorization.
In this particular package, there is a land bond project, and that was voter approved.
Right. Right.
Great.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Norm? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone wishing to make public comment? For those at home, the room is just about emptied out. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Any council discussion? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor? Show that as unanimous. Thank you. New business, order number 25-003, act on the request to name Pine Point Crossing Bridge 5260, B&M Railroad and Snow Canning Road, located on Pine Point Road, the Scarborough Veterans Memorial Bridge. Tom?
Yes, I think a number of councilors, perhaps the entire council, received some inquiries from a resident, actually from the town of Cornish, as I recall. She is apparently on a personal crusade, and I think this will be her 17th bridge in 17 different communities. And I misspoke in my cover sheet by saying this is a state program. It is in that it becomes legislation, and the state does provide signage and erects it in our direction. It's really her personal crusade in working with different legislators to bring this forward in each session. Should you approve this evening, this would be just getting out of the wire just in time to make a title and be heard and hopefully approved by this legislative session upcoming. In terms of which bridge chosen, this is, I looked at the various bridges in terms of their prominence and notoriety. This bridge, you might recall, was repaired about 5 years ago, so it is likely to be there for a long, long time. It has, we don't have many bridges, certainly not many that have aesthetic appeal. This actually has a bit of a rail to the side of it, so and it's a important vista for town. If you can
Very
appreciate going down
scenic.
Pine Point Road, crossing railroad tracks, you really know you've arrived when you do. So I thought it was a very fitting bridge. There's nothing magical beyond it other than that.
Perfect, thank you. Does anyone have questions for Tom? Anyone in the public wishing to make public comment? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Any council discussion? Yes, John?
I just want to thank Ms. Cross for her persistence and the work she's doing across the state. And so I'm glad to see this on our agenda tonight.
Okay, with that, I will call the vote. All those in favor? Show that as unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 9 is non-action items. We don't have any non-action items tonight. Item 10 is standing and special committee and liaison reports. Go ahead, Councilor Anderson. Thank you.
So we have finance tomorrow at 5 o'clock, and our focus is on the budget schedule, which feels like we just finished the last budget, so I don't know how we're talking about the budget schedule right now. And then the sustainability reserve account. Just for awareness, we're gonna try and get through the meeting by hopefully 6 o'clock if we can, because Councilor Shoup and I would like to try and attend the school board session that's taking place afterwards on the cell phone policy at the school. So again, if you guys could just come prepared, hopefully to really work through that hour for both items, that would be great. Yeah, mostly you, no.
Other updates? Sure, go ahead. Thank you. Turn your mic on.
At the
Thank you.
communication
It's getting
committee
late.
meeting, which will be in a couple of weeks, we will follow on with communication around the budget process, and we will also be following up on the Counselor Corner schedule and the thematic communication, which we've discussed before.
Perfect. Thank you. Yes, Counselor Fellows.
Thank you. Long-range planning meets on Friday morning. I'm a liaison to that, and the focus will be on the light industrial district, in particular the items that were flagged in the 90-day moratorium, which the council approved on December 18th. So we've been in contact with staff and make sure that those items are prioritized given the time sensitivity of that. Councilor Anderson will continue to be somewhat involved given his past role, and he is an alternate liaison, and so that'll help with continuity.
Perfect. Thank you. Counselor Donovan.
The School Board Ad hoc Committee.
Your mic on.
2. Thank you. School Board Ad hoc Committee number 2 continues to meet. April and I are the representatives there. They have set a very ambitious schedule weekly for quite a while. They realized that their deadline to get to presenting something to the town council that we would endorse and put on a ballot is usually a June kind of timetable. So it's not that far off. Harriman's the consultant. They seem to be very industrious. A lot of work is being done. Let's see. And the committee is a large committee, but they seem very committed. I'm impressed by the effort that's being put in and the effort to avoid some of the pitfalls that befell them previously. And they're making a real effort to gain public support and be informed. So that's going well. The Maine MMA Policy Committee, Nick Cloutier and I are handling that. That involves the legislation that the state, now that they're back in session, push out. Nick's going to take the lead role in analyzing that, discuss it with me, and I'll bring it on to the council. Thank you.
Sounds great. Thank you. Anyone else? No? For your calendars, excuse the use of my cell phone here. Just from my seat, I want to remind everyone that on January 16th, we do have a joint workshop with the school board to get a project update that will happen at 6 p.m. in council chambers. It's 1 hour. Their regular business meeting begins at 7 p.m. So we have 1 hour to get an update from the SBAC chair and the Harriman representatives. And then looking forward, just a reminder, Tom said this during the town manager report, but January 23rd, which is a Thursday, we will be having our department head meetings to discuss our goals, followed by our goal setting meeting on Saturday, the 25th. And just so that you know, I have the goals document ready to go. It was a little bit challenging to bring everybody's suggestions together, but I'm open to your feedback and your comments. And so I will have that rolled out to you. I just wanted to let tonight's meeting happen first rather than overwhelm anybody. Yes, John.
Can I just ask a question about other meetings? Tom, are we still doing the committee get-together meeting? I forget what it's called.
The old board summit?
Yeah.
We talked about that at the department head meeting. I think we're gonna push it out 2 more weeks. Point being, we thought it's a perfect opportunity to share council goals with the larger
Sure.
committees. And by then, the original date, they will not have been adopted by that point. So you'll see a communication come out as soon as tomorrow. We're just confirming space. Thank you.
Great. Anyone else? Counselor comments? Yes. Go ahead, Scott.
Just on the wetlands thing. I think I am for it. a lot of people spoke in favor of it, and it is a good thing. I think that we have a lot, the wetlands are already protected. That's a big plus that we've done in the country because they used to be filled. I guess my only thing is somebody that has already invested money into property and got a project going, and now we're gonna put the hammer down on them, and now they can't. So if there can be some kind of provision, you know, for the ones that, you know, and do this, and I think a lot of people said it should be more, and we've hinted that they will do more. I think if we're gonna do more, we should do it now. And I think that we should have it we should have it, you know, a big buffer between when we pass it, instead of just the gavel goes down, that's it, it's today, it's done. I think it should be done and let everybody know that it's gonna be, you know, in 2027 or 20, you know, whatever, 2030. You know, whenever, however a buffer you wanna give. But I think it's a good idea to give them more of a chance and a heads up before we do it.
Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other council member comments? With that, I will, oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Counselor Fellows. I
Whatever.
apologize.
No problem. I was sorry to miss the December 18th workshop and meeting. I appreciate folks felt well wishes. I did watch the recordings and looked like there was some great discussion. I was particularly struck by the discussion at the workshop for the proposed contract zone for the proposed affordable housing in Dunston at the current flea market site. That sounds like it could be very impactful. It seems like in many ways it could be a great site for it. I look forward to seeing more on that. Obviously, there are some real questions around access and traffic and safety. And I'll look forward to see whether those can be adequately addressed. But again, just looking forward to moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Donovan.
I thought Autumn kind of revealed that there were some discussions internally within her senior management, but also with some of the people who are proposing some modifications. And I think it would benefit all of us if we could get that information well in advance of the meeting, because this is second reading, this is a vote. Rocky stood up and said he wanted to have a open session with it. I don't know where that goes or not, but what I would like to do is be able to have all 7 of us be very informed as to where we are with this thing. And so that'll promote the openness of our judgment.
Yeah, if I could just speak to that, the intention is for staff to provide written commentary to this most recent set of comments we've received. I think there, as was mentioned from the podium, there's one, if not 2 amendments that staff will be bringing forward. I must admit, I think staff is to the point of they feel like they're negotiating against themselves, but I think there are one and potentially a second area that they think are reasonable to bring forward. I would not expect that they'll be responsive, other than providing comments, to all the points that have been raised. But I think hopefully you appreciate the thoroughness and seriousness they take their jobs and responsibility, and I do not expect they'll do anything less.
Thank you. Counselor Cushing.
I'll be brief. I think we're very close on this wetlands thing. And I think that what I heard tonight was that no one really disagrees with the standard. The major objection appears to be around, well, what if we can achieve the same goal in a different way? And if we can't show you that, then we fall back to the 25. And so I think if somehow we got language in front of us that basically accommodated the notion of having a developer's professional engineers come in and say, here's the good science, here's the evidence, here's the setback, here's how we can address the same goal by doing this or better. And to my mind, that would be a very reasonable compromise that would get us to, I think, where we all want to be, which is to have these wetlands protected, but to do it in a way that creates a path, you know, not to give people an out, but to accommodate better, more creative approaches, I guess. So I'm hoping that we can get there in the next 2 weeks.
Thank you, Counselor Cushing. Counselor Anderson. I
just
shouldn't have
wanna-
said it like
I
that.
just want to acknowledge former
It's because I put a
Chair-
candy in.
Town Councilor McGee is in the house, which I don't know if you guys saw him. He snuck in at some point, but hey.
Well done.
And with that, I will make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
I made the motion. I'm out of here. All those in favor? All right, thanks, guys.
Oh.